Okay, it's Margaret.
Margaret is responsible for this. Where you go now?
She's responsible for everything.
You can talk.
Oh, thank you, Vincent. I'll take advantage of that now. Okay, I'm going to talk for a minute and then we're just going to play Women's Aid video. So really, and I hope I'm not repeating things that you know already, but Women's Aid has been around for a long time now, almost whatever number of years. My edition is not great, but since 1974. We run a number of frontline specialist services for women in terms of domestic violence, and one of those is our helpline. And in 2016, we were able to go from being a 12-hour...
Margaret, can you just talk into the microphone?
Sorry. Okay. Is that a bit better? Can you hear me a bit better? I should have checked. My apologies. So I was just saying that Women's Aid has been around since 1974. We're a very old, established organisation. We've been providing a lot of different services that have grown out of the needs of women over that period of time. But one of the biggest ones that we provide is a free phone national helpline, which is completely confidential to all parts of the country. And in 2016, that helpline went from being a 12-hour helpline to being a 24-hour helpline. So that meant that we went from taking about 31 calls a day to about 44 calls a day. And the video that I'm now going to play will show you, you'll get a sense of the kind of things that we hear all of the time about the different forms of abuse. In 2016, we would have heard over 19,000 contacts would have been made with us. There would have been almost 17,000 disclosures of domestic violence against women and almost 4,000 disclosures of children being abused. So
Women call us to talk through what is happening to them. Women call in the middle of the night when everyone is asleep in bed.
Often we are the first person she has ever told.
Caller said her partner has her locked inside the house. She has no key. She can only leave when he lets her.
He told her that he would kill her, the kids and himself if she tried to leave. He drives the car really fast and threatens to crash it.
Woman is never called by her name and he shouts at her whenever he speaks to her. She feels totally alone and that it is her fault.
Caller discovered her boyfriend has taken all of her savings. All of her wages go to pay their bills.
Ex is refusing to pay maintenance for the children despite the court ordering him to do so. She has little money for food and clothes for the kids. Every day is a struggle.
Woman was raped by her ex-partner. She has left but has to go back to get her belongings. She is terrified he'll be there.
Caller was slapped in the face while she was breastfeeding her baby.
Woman is in a lot of pain. She has a broken nose, maybe a broken rib and bruising. She will go to the hospital and think about calling the guards.
Everyone thinks her husband is the best, but he is really abusive to her and the kids. No one would believe her if she ever told.
He told her children that their mother deserved to be punished. She was kicked, and he put her arm behind her back to break it.
Woman was beaten again by husband. He threw her downstairs in front of the children.
Pregnant caller was hit in the face by her partner in front of her other child, who was lying on the bed.
Man has taken the child for an access visit and is refusing to give her back. Woman is distraught and doesn't know what to do.
She has discovered he is molesting their children.
Man beats the children to hurt her.
Woman was called really horrible names and grabbed by her ex when she dropped off her daughter for an access visit. The child saw it all and became very upset.
Ex-husband had started slapping their young daughter on access visit and blaming her mother.
Caller concerned about her child and is concerned that she is being sexually abused during access visit.
She feels that they don't believe her. Her husband is good at getting the guards on his side. He tells them that she has mental health issues.
Woman feels her concerns about her children aren't being taken seriously.
Woman is afraid that her children will be taken off her if she reports the abuse against her.
Caller was so relieved because we believed her.
Through commitment, vision, and in the face of very significant funding cuts, Women's Aid worked tirelessly to ensure the expansion of the helpline to a 24-hour service in 2016.
We never judge or tell a woman what to do. We just listen and support her.
It takes courage to call us, and we are committed to being here for every woman who needs us at any hour of the day or night.
It's very strong stuff. I've seen this myself so many times, and I think it's always so powerful. But the reality is that we've known for a long time that about 1 in 5 of women in Ireland at some point in her life will experience domestic violence. It's very hard to get statistics about something that's shrouded in so much shame and secrecy. And there was a European study that was published in 2014 that interviewed women in 1,500 women in each European country in about 22 countries. They were face-to-face interviews, and you could pull out that information on a country-by-country level. So that showed that there were women, in terms of prevalence rates in Ireland, 31% of women were experiencing psychological abuse, 14% physical abuse, and 6% sexual abuse. But one of the things that came out as well in terms of that study was that in Ireland, the injury levels in terms of physical abuse are much more serious, and the prevalence is much higher, particularly when you look at things like broken bones, fractures, broken teeth. So, for example, the average for Europe is 6% in terms of those injuries, whereas it's more than double that rate in Ireland. It's 14%. We don't really know why these are the answers, or why these are the differences. But we live in a culture of victim blaming, and I am continually asked, and I think most women are continually asked if they work in this area, why she just doesn't leave. And there are many, many reasons why women don't leave. And one of them, I thought that Clara would have an opportunity to talk very much about shame. But shame is a huge issue in Ireland. It's just permeates. I often think it's like the mist that we have, It's just everywhere all the time and you feel it. And we know from some research that's been done in Ireland that about a third of victims never tell anyone at any point in their life. That means they don't tell their best friend, they don't tell anybody in their family, their sister, their mother, and they carry that with them for the whole of their life, until somebody has asked about this. The other thing that's a huge issue for women is they have a burden, I suppose, of care and responsibility about relationships. And they're very loath to break up the family. And even if the abuse that they experience is very significant, they'll often say, well, he's a good father. I don't want the children to lose their father. So they're trying to juggle all of these things. Other things that come into play are the fear of the unknown. A lot has been covered today in terms of the fear of homelessness and how real that fear is, and the fear of poverty. And also, I think women are very often, a key factor is really they're thinking about their children. If I move now, they've just gone into secondary school. Will it upset them if I move them in school? So there's a whole range of different things that feed into that. And they find themselves in this really difficult dilemma, which is like a rock and a hard place. And one woman summed it up really very clearly, I felt, when she said that what she felt was she was being forced to make a choice between hospitalisation and homelessness. And that's the reality. The women do experience physical abuse, and I think people understand that. I think what people don't understand is about actually how severe sometimes it can be in the privacy of somebody's own home, and how dangerous it can be. And in Ireland, one of the things in terms of having options about leaving an abusive relationship is we have 1/3 of the recommended EU rate, or the Council of Europe rate, of refuge. So as a national free phone helpline, we are continually looking for help for space in refuge around the country. Sometimes a woman will need a refuge near her. Sometimes the guards will ring us from somewhere and say, we will drive her anywhere in the country if we can get her into a refuge, and we can't find refuge space. And that's an ongoing problem. So women are sleeping in their cars, they're sleeping on sofas, they're sleeping in their friends, their families, or they may have to go into emergency accommodation. And in Ireland, approximately a third of, sorry, I beg your pardon, I think, yes, sorry, I'd lost the train of my thought there. But our current housing crisis has led to an increase in the number of families in emergency accommodation. And in 2016, one-parent families represented 65% of families, and most of those were female-headed households. And when I looked for data, and it's very hard to get data, and I must say I'd compliment all of the services for providing data, because if you look for government information and data, sometimes it's extremely difficult to look at the relationship between domestic violence and homelessness. I found that Focus Ireland said that domestic violence was a reason for homelessness in about 9% of families. In a survey looking at health and homelessness in Cork by the Good Shepherd Services and Cork Simon, they found that 24% of women first became homeless because of domestic violence, and this figure rose to 37% for women who were aged between 27 and 44. Sunnis House Domestic Violence Charity estimates that domestic violence plays a key role in homelessness in about a quarter of the cases that they deal with. There is some data that when you look at domestic violence prevalence rates for lone parents, which we couldn't find for here, and we know that the Garda information is not robust enough to even be published. But the UK Crime Survey has useful data on relationships and family units, and it shows that 11% of single parents had experienced domestic violence from a former partner, and that single parents were over 3 times more likely to experience domestic violence than women in any other type of household. And our own statistics, when we looked at those for 2016, showed that women are in current relationships with boyfriends or husbands or partners in about half of the cases, and about a quarter of the cases they have left that relationship. And all of our work starts from a point of view of looking at the safety of the woman and her children and working out from that and trying to develop a safety plan and a plan to mitigate risk and reduce harm. But we also know when we're doing that work that the point at which she starts to think about leaving and take an action about leaving is actually the most dangerous time. The research varies between about 3 months or 6 months either side of that, and all the way through the court process. So even that first step of going down to court and finding out or ringing up an organisation like ourselves, that is also a first step in heightening risk. And particularly when she's going to explore court options. And we're deeply aware of that and we work with that. But one of the difficulties for us is that we support women through that whole court accompaniment process, trying to secure legal protection under the domestic violence orders. The responses from judges are highly inconsistent. So we find that women are placing themselves, because they're trying to make themselves safer, at higher levels of risk, but are left without any protection in terms of barring orders or safety orders. And judges very seldom understand the dynamics of domestic violence, and particularly coercive control. There are some, it's patchy and it's unusual, and we all kind of go, wow, that's great when it happens and you get something good. But they frequently leave children and women open to further abuse. They will accept an undertaking from an abusive partner rather than issuing an order. This has been a trend now for a number of years that is really worrying. And even when talking to guards, they were saying they couldn't believe that this was such a backward step. At least if an order is in place, they have greater powers to deal with the situation when there's a 999 call. They have no powers when there's an undertaking. The other thing that there's been a big push towards mediation, which is highly appropriate in certain areas of the justice system, but is totally inappropriate in terms of domestic violence and is dangerous. And it has been a long slog to the legislation went through just recently, but even to get an agreement that the parties will be told that this is voluntary, which is about the tiniest little crack you could get in it, has been very hard work and just shows the lack of understanding in relation to it. But if you think of the balance of power in a court, the weightiness of a judge's authority, if they suggest that you do something, you can be standing there thinking, do I have to do this? What? It carries much more weight than the suggestion from one of your friends. And the other thing that women find themselves weighing up is, if I don't do this, will I be penalised if I then have to go for an order and I'm back before the same judge and I didn't do what they wanted me to do? So that leaves her in a very difficult situation. And very often that mediation space is not well understood by people who practice mediation, and we've had experiences where women have been abused, verbally abused, emotionally abused, and even physically abused in a mediation session. But even if she gets a barring order, there still is no court mechanism in place to do risk assessment with her and risk assessment and risk management with her children. So she's immediately in a situation, and we get calls very regularly, we probably are getting them today, saying, I got an order this morning for a barring order, I'm going to have to provide access next Saturday, tomorrow, whatever it is. He's really dangerous, I'm terrified, what do I do, where do I go? There are no safe contact centres. There's no supervised access. That the TUSLA use supervised access, but it is not available outside anybody that they have a direct responsibility for. There was an extremely good initiative that was an initiative from one family who was here today, Karen was here, and from Bernardus, where they set up contact centres. They piloted 3, they did an evaluation. They certainly saw an awful lot of domestic violence, and they were responding to that. And at the same time that TUSLA was set up, the funding for this was refused, and nothing has happened since. And it still remains a huge problem. And there are supervised access centres in places like the UK and a whole range of other countries where there's separate entrances, where there's supervision, where children are monitored, and it can be a period of time before then it can move on from that. But we, for some reason in Ireland, just don't seem to take that on board. And judges are highly resistant to denying access to fathers. And as you can hear, an awful lot of women are very fearful for their children. Women will sometimes tell us about marks on their children's upper legs or on they're near their genitals. They don't know what to do about that. They're fearful about pornography, child pornography being made, all sorts of things. So there needs to be a risk assessment process. The other thing just to talk about, I suppose, is that the whole area of maintenance, and Louise is going to talk about, but I just want to endorse that as well, it's highly problematic for women who have to return to court multiple times to secure maintenance payment. And we know that perpetrators, abusive partners, will use every tool in their box. One of the things I remember very much in terms of technology was as soon as those receipts had to be issued to you when you bought your newspaper or your milk, it gave abusive partners so much more control. So you were down at the shop at 3:02, but you weren't home here till such a time, and you spent this much money on this. So every single opportunity that's there is used, and maintenance very often is one of the tools that remains in his box, and he will use it. And the only light, and I'm sorry to be so dark, the only light on the horizon that I see, because already this morning there was a talk about a lack of government will to deal with fundamental issues that affect, the way we live as human beings, how we relate to each other, and what we need, and how we are not an economy. We're actually a society that needs to make enough money to keep ourselves going. But we're more than that. And we need a government that realises that. So the only light I see is coming from Europe. and it's the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. It's a landmark piece of legislation that is looking to bring up standards in terms of violence against women right across Europe. So, for example, one of the things, it's built on a number of pillars. One of the things that it would have to do would be to provide training to professionals, such as judges, so that they, and I think that your presentation in terms of labour market interventions shows the importance of adequate training and how it can really make such a difference to the response that somebody receives. And states will be required to fulfill and to report on how they address violence against women in all its forms, including domestic violence, sexual violence, etc. To take measures to prevent it, which is hugely important, and to put measures in place in schools, to protect victims and to prosecute perpetrators. 22 countries have signed and ratified the convention at this point. Ireland has signed but has not ratified. So it needs to do it. Thank you for your attention.